Apparently, there's a whole lot of class, and then they all call their names. Roll call.
Roll call.
They do the roll call.
Okay. Hello.
Bye.
Hello.
How did you go?
Good, I loved it. Free from the law.
How good is it?
Hello.
I was like, I've read this, but the Message translation, this is powerful. That was the Message translation. It was translated about 15 years ago by a guy who recently passed away.
Oh,
And that's his interpretation of this ancient text in modern day kind of English.
Mm-hmm.
One in this was an interpretation probably about 20 years ago, but it's a different version. So it's the same meaning. They just put it in a language.
Okay.
So yeah. So
if you were Jewish, you had to get circumcised.
yes. So there were all these rules that you had to follow to be a good Jew.
And it was more for like cleanliness and stuff, wasn't it?
But just, I mean, think about any rules that might be imposed on someone for being good in the eyes of God. So it could be if you went to a church and someone said you can only be part of this church if you are dunked in water, or you can only be part of this church if you speak in tongues, or you can only be part of this church if you wear this uniform or you jump through these hoops. So that's all being under the law. And what I love about that was that last bit there about what counts is whether we have been transformed into a new creation. Because otherwise you get all these people, they only want you to be part of their church so they can boast about it, claim you as their disciples. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in Galatians 6, and I just went, wow, I've never even heard that before.
I'm just trying to think now.
You know, so people, you know, a good example is actually like the local high school, the Catholic school. I'm not picking on the Catholics. Promise I'm not picking on Catholic. But like loads of people came to us and said, can you baptize our child so our kid can get into the school?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's kind of like you've got to go through that hoop to get through to that. So Paul wasn't having a go at those people.
No.
But what he was saying was there had been people that had come into this particular church, just like this community.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got this new community learning to follow Jesus, but then some people who were Jewish have come into that community and started to say, look, you're not really a follower of God because you haven't done this.
Yeah, that's
right. You're not really a follower of God because you haven't jumped through. So and some of them were starting to believe it and go, maybe I need to do this then. Maybe I need to jump through that hoop.
Yeah.
And so what Paul was saying is, don't go back to that. Why would you go back to that legalism? Free in Christ. You know, let him guide you and lead you. And why would you go back to
wherever you are?
Yep.
You have to be
fascinating.
You don't have to be in a church.
Yeah.
You can be wherever you are, you know, and make that call.
Yeah. So it's a really powerful text.
Yeah.
To say that, you know, don't be bound by
rules.
Not so much, because when you follow Jesus, it doesn't mean there's no rules. But it's not like when you're transformed by God, there is love in you. Therefore, out of that love, you respect people.
Oh, yes.
You are kind to people. Yeah. So there are rules that are put there, do you know what I mean? That are put in your heart. So you know that if you're rude to someone, you're going to have a conscience. You know?
You're going to feel it's not right.
You're going to feel it's not right. And that's the kind of the God is in us.
Like we'll say, like, it's the peace that you have.
Yeah.
And the heartfelt feelings that you have for others.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's yeah, so it's actually saying, let God transform your life, and let that be enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And
Yeah.
and don't let anyone tell you that you're not good enough because you're not jumping through this hoop or you're not doing this. Like you're made in the image of God, and
You're doing what you can do.
yeah,
And those hoops are just, they're man-made. They're not God-made. They're
and some of them might not be bad. Like then there might not be. Some of them might be good. Like some of them might be like you should respect someone, but then it's the stuff that's the circumcision is pretty what's the word?
Full on.
It's pretty full on, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
having to fully actually deface your body.
Because you were born with it.
Yeah, it's not about. I don't want to get into the whole debate about whether you should or shouldn't, but what Paul was saying is that you don't have to become like this Jewish culture to be right with God. Like you don't have to become a salvo to be right in the eyes of God. You don't have to become a Catholic or a Protestant or a Hillsong goer, church goer to be right in the eyes of God. It's saying,
and you're not going to be classed as dirty even if you don't get it done.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's saying that God is the one that wants to transform our lives, and that should be enough. Yeah, it's fascinating.
And not to it says it's not about being boastful and it's about just being humble and
Yes. So we'll just see if Susie's coming back. All right. Excellent. So excellent. What did you guys pick up? Doug, Betty, Matthew, Camilla?
Well, to carry that a little bit further, when we were in Zimbabwe, we wasn't allowed to wash our own hands before a meal. They had to wash our hands for us. So whether that's carried on that they've already got Jesus in their life to do that. Otherwise, they wouldn't bend down so far to wash somebody else's hands.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. What do you reckon, Matt?
I don't want to wash my hands.
Right?
I don't want to wash my hands.
I can't hear you, Matt. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
That's better. No, there's a few things going on. I often think of a bit of a joke when it comes to the circumcision bit, but I couldn't quite get that out of my head because the whole thing was repeated so many times during the well, that's it, and like jumping through hoops. I mean, seriously, it's all part of it. But I think the joke was, and it's quite clean, but it's about it. There was a fella who one noticed that the other one was circumcised, and he asked him if it hurt, and he said no, he's too young to remember. But come to think of it, he couldn't walk for 10 months afterwards. So that's probably the whole thing really that I sort of noticed on was the association with being in Jesus or accepted into Jesus, the family of Jesus.
Yeah.
And therefore our lineage went straight back to Abraham as a result, which I thought was very interesting. And I also was looking at how the Spirit was referred to, and which is what we technically should be, or I think what Paul was trying to draw our attention to, was living in the Spirit and trying to understand its implications in our lives and how it appears in our lives. So that's what I picked up.
Yeah, brilliant. That's so good. That's really great. Well, Susie's nearly here too. She's coming. I really love that bit in verse 17. I love, first of all, that Paul goes in 6 verse 11. He goes, notice what large letters I use as I write these closing words. I love it, how he's trying to stress it really loud. He's like, in verse 17, those who are trying to force you to be circumcised want to look good to others. They don't want to be persecuted for teaching that the cross of Christ alone can save. And even those who advocate circumcision don't keep the whole law themselves. They only want you to be circumcised so they can boast about it. That passage really stuck out to me. I've just mentioned that before, but
It's just, it's the same thing as going to church on Sundays.
yeah,
That's the same sort of thing.
yeah. Sometimes, yeah, in communities, the expectation is if you don't go on Sunday, then you're backsliding or something. Yep.
And you're a heathen or whatever they thought. Yeah.
It's true, yeah. So it's not saying that going to church on Sunday is a bad thing, but what it's saying,
No.
if you're stuck and you're told that if you don't do it, then you're a slave to that system. That's what it's saying.
Yep.
Pick up, Jenny.
There's just a statistic that I did pull up was about apparently there was estimated 229 deaths per year from circumcision in the United States, as well as 1.3% neonatal deaths.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, that's one statistic from someplace.
That's from America.
Mm.
That's a lot of people.
How old is that statistic?
Like I said, it's just one, and I could dig deeper. I can have a look. I'll go in. I'll see if we can find it before the end of the night.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about the health benefits, but that's not
No, it's not part of it. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's because you could put an argument together to say that there are good health benefits to do that, but that's not. That's not the point of this. Though I think the point is that Paul was teaching them to follow Jesus and to be led by Jesus,
rather than categorize themselves and
not to be told that no, you're not good enough. You need to be a slave to our law and do it this way. Yeah. So it's fascinating because we hear it all the time. It's like, oh no, you're not a real church because you don't do it this way, or you need to be doing it this set way. And I'm like, why do we need to be slaves to a system? Why do we need to be slaves to doing it one way? Like, we're a family. Isn't that enough?
But the other thing too, I suppose, it's what you identify with, isn't it really? So these organisations, if you like, whether we're a family or not, you have to sort of comply to the identity. Otherwise, that organisation ceases to exist if everyone doesn't comply. What Paul's saying is basically, this is what you should be doing in the first place, and everything else is secondary. So those that want to hold on to that identity, then therefore, they've got the most to lose, seriously. So,
well, I mean, ultimately, I think that's the point. I think the point is that we comply to Jesus more than anything else. And even if that means that if we're holding to Jesus more than an organisation, then that may mean that the organisation may fade into the background. Depends on what God wants. But what actually is the main thing is what Jesus wants. And so for us to say, oh yeah, like, because even for me, like, I wear this red shield everywhere. Everyone sees the red shield. They know that I'm from the Salvation Army, and I love the Salvation Army. But at the end of the day, my allegiance is to Jesus, and the choices I make are the choices. Hey, Susie, welcome back.
Hi, Susie.
Yeah, great. And the choices that I make are in allegiance to Jesus more than anything else. So, and often if our allegiance is to an organisation more than Jesus, then you start to get problems. So, for example, if the rules say that a homosexual married couple can't be leaders in the Salvation Army, and I hold on to the rules more than I do to Jesus, then I'm going to start to hurt lots of homosexual people. If that makes sense, because I'm now excluding them from this opportunity. So it's a difficult issue because I want to love people and empower people, include people. But if I hold on to what the system says more than what Jesus says, then I start to choke the mission. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I mean, their rule, they could say the rule is fine. You know, you could keep that rule.
Yeah.
I mean, society wouldn't say that today, but you can keep that rule and everyone could, you know, who's within the organisation would be hunky-dory. We're just not going to connect with the gay community.
That's really interesting, Peter, because that allows God to do his job with people.
Yes.
It's so powerful. Thank you so much.
It's mature. I think it's mature. You know, that's what Jesus wants us to be. He wants us to be people who hold on to him more than anything else. And it's hard to do that because of pressure, peer pressure. You know, like there's, like the text says here, especially if your ego's in the way, if you want to be seen to be good by your leaders, and if you want to get up on there in the world, then you kind of got to conform to what people say. And as Paul says, look, if I wanted to be famous, I wouldn't be following Jesus. Do you know what I mean? If I want to be famous, I'd be going doing something else, which I love. Yes, so following Jesus is not about a popularity contest. Yes.
Yeah. There's a part where it says you've got to lose everything to find everything.
Beautiful. You've got to lose everything to find it. It's true.
Yeah, because everything in the world, all these things that we have, all the things of Western society, it's not going to make you happy. And I've said, and you've probably said this yourself, I'm going to have nothing to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, like all these things, they're just things at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And when you actually find like what you've said, like about Christ,
yeah,
that's worth more than anything else.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
and even that analogy of homosexual couple, right? So if you could read that rule is there, and you go, oh, I respect that rule, but if you take the idea of what Jesus says, you've got to lose it to find it. So if I let go of that rule, and I empower a homosexual gay couple to lead and who are following, what have I just done?
You've gone by the word that he wanted you to.
Yeah, but what have I just done to those people?
You've empowered them.
I've included them.
And like with the word.
Yeah, I've said to them that in God's eyes, I love you. In God's eyes, you are right. In God's eyes, you are welcome. In God's eyes, you're a part of this.
If you say no, then you're being like...
I'm excluding.
Yeah, it's like a rule book.
Yeah.
There's rules and regulations
Yeah.
by saying no.
And some people could come back and say, oh, yeah, but in the Bible it says this.
Yeah.
It says this. It says you shouldn't let them, you know. And
maybe you're probably saying, who am I to judge? Because it's not up to me to judge something.
yeah. So when we hold on to the rules, we choke the movement. We can choke the movement. Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating.
Sorry, Pete. It cut out when you said you choke.
The rules. When you choke the movement, when you hold on to the rules so much,
Yeah.
rather than Jesus,
Yeah.
choke the movement.
Right. Yeah. And you choke God, the movement of God.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to change those people. God is the one. But we have to get them to the point where they can say hello to him, at least, and be in conversation.
Yeah, or to be in a relationship where they feel accepted by God, Yeah.
And that's just a great example, because that is a very in-your-face example, but there are a lot of other examples that are less dramatic, but equally against the rules.
Yeah.
That divides society.
Well, you think of like 20 years ago, if you got divorced and you were in the church, you'd get kicked out of the church. You know,
Yeah.
the rules would be, that's it, you're out.
I actually remember that with my mum.
Yeah.
She was afraid
Yeah.
when she was younger, like 20 years back, like saying, oh, even more than that, 30 years, that people would accept her because she wasn't married.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
she wouldn't be accepted.
Yeah. So
And that's a lonely place.
it is. It's a lonely place, isn't it?
Was, yeah.
I remember a guy. He was in a band practice and in the salvos, and he had coloured socks on. He meant to wear navy socks with the uniform. And so because he had coloured socks on, he was kicked out of the band.
Really?
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, he was kicked out of the band, and I'm like, what the?
Yeah.
So when you hold on to the rules more than Jesus, you get this weird stuff that goes on. Don't you?
Yeah.
It's like, what? Doug and Betty, you'd have some great stories, wouldn't you, about that?
Well, we had the same sort of thing. One of our bandsmen was a smoker,
Yep.
and they ended up kicking him out of the band. And we said to him, if you do, you'll lose him. And
Yeah.
we never seen him again.
Yeah. It's sad, isn't it? Because they're excluded and they're shamed and they're made they're dehumanized. And I think that's not what Jesus is about. Jesus is,
Having a congregation.
it's, well, yeah, you could say congregation, but I think it's more intimate even. It's family, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
It's like we're part of, I mean, the Trinity is described as a family. God the Father. We're
They
brothers.
want to belong, but
Yeah.
they want to belong, but they don't want to be a clone. They want to be, as the message said, their own creative and individual self.
Yes.
And maybe if you wear red socks when you shouldn't by the law, that's just saying, I'm an individual.
So why would God want us to be our creative and individual self?
Well, he says he makes us, that's how he's made us.
Yeah, but why would he want us to be like that?
Because
Why?
we wouldn't be unique. We wouldn't, the world's all different.
Right? So we would be unique. So what? Why does he want us to be unique?
He made us on an individual basis. He made us all different to be, like, I say, like, he didn't make junk. He made us to be who we're supposed to be. He created us one by one,
Yep.
not mass produced. He created us to be our own being.
Yep.
Be
Why though?
I think
What
that's
was
a freedom of choice to follow Jesus Christ.
Come on.
A freedom. I think it's a freedom of choice. He made us to be like that so we can follow Christ or follow,
Yeah,
God.
but why? What's the purpose?
Because we're only part of the body and we live in community as a whole. But
Right.
if we were that whole thing, we would be little gods, or God, we would be, trying to be God. Or
I'm going to annoy you a bit more and just say why. Why? Why? What's the purpose? Who cares that we're all unique?
So that we, like, if we're all the same, we're just doing all the same thing, but being different. We have a choice of either if we want to follow, if we don't want to follow, if we, have different personalities, different behaviours, and that because we're different, coming together means one thing.
Right. So it shows
Like last week.
Yeah.
Like that.
it shows a community that's diverse.
Yeah, and diversity of people.
And what would that do for onlookers?
It would make them wonder why peaceful these people are happy, and how can I get that?
What else would it do for onlookers?
It would promote wellness in their life.
Right? Because I still want to get to the purpose. I don't think we've still got to the purpose of
Okay.
To show what Christ can do for you.
to show what Christ can do for us. Why?
To give God honour.
Give God
Praise
honor, yeah.
To
But
praise Him.
let's think practically. I can give you the answer, but let's work it out.
Okay.
He has
Okay.
for all of us.
the love that he has for all of us, yes, all of us.
Died on the cross.
Yeah.
To give us
To be joyful and loving in life and have hope.
Yep. Now I agree. All of those things are about what it does for us.
Yes.
But you, Susie, are a professional pianist, and you are in a different world to what I live in.
Sorry, I'm a professional
You're a
piano teacher. Yep.
pianist, and you live in a different world to what I live in. You meet,
Oh, okay. Yep.
you meet people that I will never meet.
Yep.
Yeah. So when there's diversity in people, it means there's diversity in who we can connect with.
Inclusiveness.
Yeah. So, but the people that you meet every day of your life, whether it's students or teachers or whatever, you're going to connect with those people. I'm never going to see them.
Yeah.
So if the mission was dependent on me, I'm never going to see those people.
No, people miss out.
People miss out. So the diversity is important because we attract people. You attract people that I.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
You're reaching different demographics.
Yeah, and so that's the point of the study tonight.
Okay.
That's the point of
That's very interesting.
Like a lock and a key, I suppose. Different people have different keys to different locks.
Yep.
The key master that can open all doors.
He is the key master that can open all the doors. But the good news is that he chooses us, you, me,
To give the keys to others.
to give the keys to other people.
Yeah.
And
lock other doors.
we are to be like Jesus. And so if we become who grow up in our faith to be slaves to a system where we're like, oh, we've got to do life this way, or we have to do church this way, what are we doing?
Narrowing up.
Narrowing the path. Only 6% of Australians go to church.
Yeah, hanging on to the keys.
6% of Australians go. So all of us would be working really hard to reach 6% of Australians.
Yeah.
So God doesn't want us to just be narrow-minded because he wants to reach the whole world.
That's like the sat phone and you haven't got coverage.
That's right. Yeah.
Very, very slim coverage.
Very slim coverage. Yeah. So.
Can you? Oh, right. I think I got that.
No. What did you? Yeah. Well, he was talking about a. Sorry. No, he was talking about a satellite phone. It's limited coverage.
Yeah. Got it.
So, like Camilla, who's at the childcare, she's reaching people every day in the childcare. Doug and Betty, that's at the residential place up the road here, Bellarine Springs, reaching people that we wouldn't meet every day, and Jenny down in St Leonard's and at the shop, reaching all these people, walking the dog. You're going to be seeing people we're not seeing. So, and Matthew, being the legend that he is, wherever life happens. So we're all of us have a purpose. And you, Woolworths, if we were to write how many people we influence each as a person, each individual, there would be hundreds of people that we connect with in just with us. Yeah?
Yeah.
And so I think the whole point of Jesus is that it creates such a diverse example of Jesus so it's possible for us to connect with whoever. And you see it. Yeah. People
we're connecting like a human network.
Yeah. It's a human network that's guided by God. So God is the head. God is the head of the network.
Yeah.
And now if I was the head of the network, how's that going to work?
You're going to spread.
If I was the head of the network for this team here, how's that going to work?
You tell people.
Burnout, it's called.
Yeah, I'll be like, Susie, can you go visit blah, blah, blah. Can you go visit that person? And hey, what about this person? I'm like, oh, no, not that person. They don't fit in. No, not that one. You know? So it becomes this really weird network, and it's never going to reach anything, right? So every one of us are connected to the head, and God is the head, not Peter's the head. Otherwise, we'd all be bald.
Told you, grass doesn't grow on busy street.
So God is the head. And so Paul is saying, why would you become a slave back to this old way of thinking, which is only going to make the converts happy for those people that are, it's going to make them look good. Actually, it's not about it. It's about God, and God wants everyone to be part of the kingdom.
And how to help others.
So think about, it's even more strategic than that, because in Luke chapter 10, it talks about a seeker of peace, a person of peace. God prepares people of peace in the community for us to meet. God is preparing, and Jesus invites us in Luke chapter 10, verse 2. That's why every day at 10:02 we pray that God will raise up workers. He invites us to pray that God will raise them up. And it's not because it's dependent on our prayer for God to raise them up, but I think it's because God wants us to be aware that there are people in our community who he's speaking to, like you, like CJ, like everyone, like Tony, like everyone who's connected to our community, like Matthew, like everyone here. Where there was like a calling. God was speaking to them and drawing them to something greater. And that's what a seeker of peace is. So God is saying that we need to be so liberal in our love that we can connect with the seekers of peace. So you think about people in our community, the transvestites, or you think about the bikies, or the lonely child that's been neglected all the time. There's all these different people in our community that are often isolated and put out on the side, but God can use us to help connect them. So just in that example, anyone here have any bikie friends?
Well, I went down to the shop one day, and there was two skinheads walking around looking for stuff.
Excellent.
And the people just looking at them and walked past, and I said to the fellas, "What do you want?" And he said, "Oh, we can't find this and that." And I said, "Oh, well, it's over there. I'll show you." And one of the ladies said, "You're talking to them?" I said, "Well, those people." And I said, "And one of my boys is a skinhead, so I can't." Because one of my boys was 14, and he said, "Oh, I don't want this here anymore," and he just took the shaver and cut it all off.
Yeah.
So, they just, young men said they're not going to attack you in the shop anyway.
That is a perfect example, isn't it?
Mm.
Even now, like we're hearing about the Chinese that are being harassed because the government's getting a bit, toey about what the Chinese government's doing. So there's people here who are Chinese are starting to get afraid, and then other people will be like, "Oh, it's the Chinese. We've got to look out for them." Or by us loving the Chinese in our community, what are we doing?
We're being like-minded like Christ.
We're being like Jesus. We're showing them you're included. And you see what happens. When people are excluded, what happens?
Causes conflict.
What else happens? Fights.
Unhappiness. And it becomes...
isolation, depression.
It becomes antichrist.
Yeah. And they get driven to a point where they fight back even.
Depression, anxiety, anger.
Yeah, and they can start to fight back. And then when they fight back, then they're like, "Oh, see, they are horrible people." Often it's the exclusion that's...
But it misrepresents Jesus and God.
Yeah.
And that's where, religion gets a bad name.
Yeah.
And religion, I see religion being the law that people sort of talk when they say, "Oh, they're not religious."
Yeah.
And even they say somebody is religious, but they don't distinguish between those who are spiritual and those who are follow the law. particularly they've had experience of people following the law, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, excellent.
Our whole topic or talk about tonight has been in verse 13 of chapter 3. It says, by becoming a curse for us, Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. For the scripture says, anyone who has been hanged on a tree is under God's curse.
Yeah. So he became the curse for us.
That's right.
Now, Betty, when you did what you did today, what did you become to that lady? Or what could you have become to that lady?
Well, what did I do?
Hey?
What did I do?
No, but she could have gone, oh, that Betty. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, that one. Yeah, no.
She's hanging out with skinheads. Like, you've just cursed yourself.
Well,
so when we, you know, no, so when we,
that's her problem, not mine.
It is her problem. I agree with you. But what I'm saying is when we lay down our lives for others, like as Jesus was our example, we become a curse too. Yeah. So part of our role is to be that curse. And so we absorb the pain. We absorb the pain of the person that we're connecting with so that they can be included. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And that's hard because that requires a sacrifice. Sacrifice of reputation, sacrifice of, pain and rejection. And we could go, oh, I'm not following Jesus. This is pretty hard. You know? Why did I bother? Why did I bother to help that person? You know, it wasn't even worth it. They didn't even appreciate me. You know? We can all get defensive and push back and it's interesting. Matthew and I went out to help someone on Sunday who needed some housing. I haven't told Matthew this bit, but we got housing for him that Sunday night, but on the Monday the housing didn't happen because the guy that we went to help went AWOL. He wouldn't answer his phone. We couldn't connect with him. Anyway, 1 o'clock in the morning, I was around at his house with the police to see whether he was still alive because I feared he may have committed suicide. So went to the house. Anyway, after knocking and freaking out because the phone was ringing and no one was answering, I'm like, oh no, this guy, he must have done it. Anyway, the police officer yelled out the guy's name and it was quiet and then he went, yeah, what do you want? And I'm like, oh, good.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, yes, he's alive. This is great. This is great news. And then he comes out and starts abusing me. He comes out and abuse me. And he's like, why had you woken me up? Why didn't you answer my phone calls? Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, mate, we've been trying to contact you all day. People have been trying to help you all day. Where have you been? So it turned out he ended up having some drugs and passed out for the afternoon. So, but the reason I tell that story is when we enter into the story of trying to help someone, there is pain. There's a cost. There's a cost to that relationship, isn't there? There's a cost that comes. And then Jesus actually says in Luke 10, stay with the people of peace. The peace. What do you think he meant by when he says stay with the seekers of peace?
If you stay with people who aren't the seekers of peace, then you will become like-minded like them.
Ooh, did you all hear that?
No, not all of it.
If you stay with the people who aren't people of peace, you become like-minded like them.
If you stay with people who are seekers of peace, you become like a part of their group. So
you can connect in with their group.
You will become peaceful like them.
Yes. Okay.
Like, it's like that saying, don't hang around with the wrong crowd, or don't, because
They have a dog yelling not with fleas.
Something like
Something
that.
like that. Well, that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Yes, I hear what you're saying, but sometimes we're called to do that. But you don't really know. You don't really know what you're getting, or whether a person is a seeker of peace, until you've tried to connect with them.
Yeah.
And that was probably my thing before when we're talking about races and the state of fear or play at the moment. There still needs to be a level of discernment
Yes.
in regards to each individual, not blanketing everyone, but each individual. That's the level that we're working on. And I also often, I think about if we project love, and if the message is love and we're trying to act with love, then realistically it's not necessarily fitting into anything other than people, I suppose, that we encounter actually fitting into us.
Yes.
If that makes sense. If it's from a loving direction or with loving intent behind the actions that you do. And I noticed when we did work on Sunday, that's pretty much where we were coming from. But that's a complicated situation.
Yes.
That person is extremely complicated.
Yes.
Or complex. There's a lot going on.
Doesn't trust anyone. Has had experienced trauma.
Exactly. You look at compounding things like that, and to try and find the individual through all those layers of sediment or whatever you want to call it, of build up over the years through their experience. It's not something you can. People probably can do it in half an hour.
No.
But it takes a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to build a genuine connection with someone,
it could work both ways.
Yes.
Because one of my sons really pulled me up one day.
Yep.
I said to him, "Why do you bring all these lame ducks home from school? All those ones that had a bad reputation or wasn't well off?" And he said, "Well, that's what you do, Dad. You're always helping somebody out on the farm." So it really shook me for a while.
James said that to me the other day. Like, he was getting into trouble at school. Like, it was when I said the other day, it was about a month ago. It was just as I went back, and he was getting into trouble at school. And I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, "Oh, I'm just hanging with these kids that are, have got issues, and I'm just wanting to help them." And I'm like, he goes, "I'm just wanting to be like you, Dad." I'm like, "No, but you're at school." You need to work this out. It's funny.
It worked the same.
Gorgeous.
It's cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. But yeah, so I think, though, a seeker of peace is if you look at the parable of the sower in Mark chapter 4, Jesus talks about the 4 types of soil. Do you remember that?
The what? Soil?
Parable of the sower, where Jesus talks about.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you plant the seed onto hard soil, then there's shallow soil, and there's weedy soil, and there's good soil. So he says the kingdom of God is like that. So the only real place where the seed actually grows is in the good soil. And why is it good? Doug and Betty, what makes soil good?
Well, it's not so much what soil is good, but it's what it does to what's growing in it.
Yeah.
It goes 10 times or 20 times more than what it would be on bad soil.
Yeah, right. Does the fertilizer like poo help?
Every time.
Yeah. So sometimes the lives that are full of rubbish, like full of crass analogy of poo, are often a good is a life that's ready for it. Is a life that's ready for the gospel, but not, as we saw the other night. There's some people who are not ready for it because they don't trust anyone, or it's prickly, it's hard soil. They've become so hard in life that the seed's not going to get in there yet. And so and then sometimes we'll sow into people's lives and it will be shallow soil. There'll be not enough roots. So they might grow up quickly and then it'll just wither because there's not enough roots. Or then there might be the seed that goes into the weedy soil.
Yeah.
And it grows up and it gets choked by life's problems or life's circumstances, or I can't follow Jesus because I need the money, or I can't do this, you know, these challenges. And then you get the good soil, the life that's ready to receive it. And I think we have to sow anyway. But God does say to stay with.
We'll see. Even with that, I mean, an exercise in compassion, just understanding a person's situation. They may not be ready at that particular point, but there's many ways just through your actions that you can be interpreted.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to say much, but in what you're doing can reflect or speak volumes in regards. So you just don't. The other thing too is like when you're communicating, and if you're trying to, I suppose, be mindful that you're doing God's work or work that God wants you to be participating in, that it's not necessarily language that we speak through. It could be anything. It could be somebody observing us from across the street. It could be somebody, you know, associated with a car that turns up later or something like that after the event and sees something. It could be somebody 2 years down the track that gets to meet this person.
Yeah.
So,
Could be
you know, we
Facebook.
can't. Yeah, I mean, we're used to instant kind of responses to things. Well, you know, sometimes the work that we do, we won't know. You know, we've planted that seed, but it might take 7 years for it to bear fruit. So you just don't know.
Well, we've got loads of stories where that's happened. You know, people have just been watching. I think of Steph, Mark and Steph. You know, they were not followers of Jesus for 8-9 years. We never tried to convert them. We never tried to say, you know, oh, look, you're wrong for believing this. We just loved them. And as they started to seek out things, like they tried all these things to try and find meaning. They tried veganism. They tried all these different things to get meaning. And in the end, these weird signs started to happen and they couldn't explain it. And they're like, I think there's something about it, right? You've been watching. There's something happening. And now they're like, that's the only explanation. It must be Jesus that's doing this. And now they follow Jesus and they're sold out to him. And it's not they're like committed to the institution or anything. They're just part of the family. And they're now, the choices they are making are out of that life of following Jesus. And
so Pete, that's the fallow ground that the gardener fed.
Yes.
And kept feeding.
Yeah.
But I've forgotten the gentleman's name.
Joel.
The one on
Matthew.
Matthew, like he said, oh no, I'm losing the track of. Provided God is saying, stay with these people.
Yeah.
You just feed them, and as you said, it took all those years, but you didn't let them go. You just stayed with them.
That's right.
Like the farmer.
Yep. See, quite often actually, when I used to be a news cameraman and there was like a break-in, and I'd go up to the police who were there, the detectives as they're going through the scene, I'd say, look, I'm expecting you to come up with evidence of who did it, and I'll give you 29 minutes from now. Because the point there was we're all conditioned to expect results in such a short period of time. And I think the thing is there's actually the realistic approach is to, just more or less invest in the work, invest in the person and spend the time with them that you can. Do all that you can in that moment.
Yeah.
And the results, whatever they may be, will be produced later. It's out of your hands at that point. So
that's the faith walk, isn't it?
It's beautiful.
It is.
And Jesus modeled that. Look, for 30 years, he lived in community before he started his mission. For 30 years. He grew up in the temple. He was an exceptional student. People thought, yeah, he's great. He would have, as a carpenter, he would have known lots of people. He would have worked for the Roman Empire, would have worked for anyone who needed the furniture fixed. He was known in community before he started. And so when he started the mission, people would have gone, hang on, you see it. What did they say? Isn't that the carpenter's son? Isn't that Joseph's son? Well, what's going on? So that his transformed life, that baptism was the catalyst of the movement through his relational streams. Because I don't think Peter, James, and John and all those guys were strangers to Jesus. I think they'd been observing him his whole life. And
from a distance, yeah.
From a distance, they would have heard about it. And then they joined to be part of that movement. And I think that's our role. So as we start to follow Jesus, we don't need to force anything. I think we become like that mustard seed in the ground, that as the roots grow deep into the community that we're in, they absorb the toxins of the community like the mustard seed, and it helps the health of the community. And so people get to see us, get to trust us over time. They get to understand that, yeah, we follow Jesus, but they're not like the wacko ones that are trying to get you to get to this. Like it breaks down all the barriers, so they get to see that actually, I think I could trust what they believe, because when they show up, stuff happens that I can't explain, and I want that. I want that. And I think that's exactly what Jesus did. It's exactly what he did. And then that's what Paul went on to do. And so our role as followers of Jesus is to connect with God, to listen to him and do what he says. And as our lives transform, wherever we find ourselves, whether it's in Woolworths, whether it's in St. Leonard's, or whether it's in a piano lesson, like no matter where we are, God is using us to connect with people. And some of those people we connect with might be ready to receive the gospel. Some of them might grab it, and then, we've seen that too. We've seen that in this community. People go, oh yeah, I want it, and then wither away. Yeah. But pretty much everyone that's part of our family are part of the family, right? And they grow as God works in their lives, and it's beautiful. I think the way God designed his kingdom and his church was so simple, but so the challenge is on us. Not about us, because God will do it, but each one of us have been are called to follow Jesus, and it's not just so we can believe in him.
The other thing too, Peter, or another thing, I should say, not the other thing. When we're talking about quotes and that before, one quote I heard was, if you find someone noble, try to emulate them. If you find something wrong with a person, take a look at yourself. Yeah. And I think working with people and working with them in these environments also gives us it's a blessed opportunity, really, to examine our own behaviour and our own views, and it does test our values and our opinions, but it's a way of not being stagnant. We're moving. To me, like I said, I'm blessed, I feel, because you get the opportunity to evolve and continue. Your spirit continues to evolve, and by being challenged by some of their situations and circumstances.
Yeah.
So
that just reminded me. Yeah. Well, you go, Susie.
Oh, it reminded me also. Someone once said to me, when you point the finger, there are three pointing back at you, and you know who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we look at Hebrews 12, Paul speaking again says, since we're surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. And I think that's a really, we can often say, oh yeah, that we got to let go of sexual immorality, or I've got to let go of my bad language, or you could read it from a legalistic side, or you could read it from a religious point of view. We need to let go of what entangles us from a religious point of view. press on towards the life that God has planned for us. And that life is a very exciting adventure. We will get into trouble because we will be so loving and kind, the world won't be able to cope with that. Like, how dare you include those people? How dare you stand up for refugees? How dare you stop them mining that country? How dare you do that? It's all, people have a lot to lose. Stand up for what's right. So who are the people in our lives? Who are the people in our lives who need to know about the love of God? Think about them. Who are the people? And we should pray that God will give us the wisdom, the determination, the patience, the love. Isn't it? Oh, hang on. What is it? The joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. God will equip us by giving us His Spirit to reach those people.
Amen.
Give us the words to say. He promises that in here too.
Amen.
Words to say, but as Matthew has said, it's the life. It's when we show the reality of God, people are watching it. They'll see it. They'll be like, I don't understand it, but I'm interested. So yeah, and each one of us here are commissioned by Jesus to go and immerse people in the reality of God. That's the commission. It's not a paid job. It can be a paid job, but it's actually a lifestyle. It's actually a choice, isn't it? It's a choice to, I'm going to share this love with whoever I meet and connect with, and then stay with those who really want it. And in the meantime, another thing I think it says to stay with the seekers of peace rather than stay with the prickly ones is because when you stay with the seekers of peace, a beautiful community forms that everyone wants to be part of. Yeah. So if I just hung with Kate and Kate likes hanging with me, so we've got this friendship now, and everyone will be like, gee, they seem really friendly, really nice. I want part of that. I want to be their friends. Or how do I get to be their friends? Or when we stay with prickly people and people that don't want us, it's constantly creating grief. It's a conflict constantly. People will be like, I don't want to be part of that community. That's giving me a headache. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So, but sometimes we have to do that too, like the youth group, for example. Like the youth group is a constant state of chaos, but in that space, people are finding acceptance and love in themselves. So we each have a role to play, and it's not about trying to get them, the people that we connect with, to be part of this community here. It's about us getting them to follow Jesus in the world so that they can then go and reach the people that they know. People that they know that wouldn't probably want a bar of religion either. Yeah? So that's the Great Commission. It isn't to go and start a church. It's to go and make a disciple, and that disciple is someone who starts to follow Jesus. For the very purpose that their life be transformed so that they too can go and transform other people. Not to make them Christians again. It's about giving them life in all its fullness. Yeah? Are we on the same page?
Yeah. Yeah. And spread the good news.
Spread the good news, which, as Doug pointed out, is about Jesus dying on the cross. You know, it is about the fact that God absorbs our pain. He becomes that takes away our curse. He absorbs all our shame, all our pain, and the people that we meet. We absorb their pain and their shame, and we give it to God as well, so they too can be accepted and loved and feel connected. And you know, that's why we have Lisa now doing the child trauma and family therapy, because she's really helping us to connect with children who are traumatized, you know, the troubled kids that people them, who are often just dismissed as the needy ones and set and put in a corner. and we're like, actually, they have a need. What is their need? Why are they acting out? And we're trying to teach us and the community that these guys have needs. And today, I was away because a teacher had implemented a strategy and actually had connected with a student like she had never connected with a student before, and got the student across the threshold into the premises of the school. And this student every day had been standing at the gate going, I'm not coming in, I don't want to go. And so some of the people were starting to say, oh, this girl's a bit silly, let's go with her, right? Until we found out what the need was. And then we found out what the need was and met that need, she now walks into school. So it's actually, as we let go of ourselves, because it's easy to call someone silly, isn't it? As we let go of ourselves and connect in with people genuinely, they are included. And it's the inclusion of people which is so important. You know, I've got colleagues who have been excluded because of the choices that they have made. And I've got people who I know that have walked away from God because they've been excluded. And I think what God is doing through our community is reminding the world that we have to include everyone. And everyone wants to be included. They don't want to sit, but to be able to say,
it's there if you want it.
You are valuable. We love you. And they won't trust us yet because they've been hurt. They're hard. It still needs to be cultivated. And it's it's God that cultivates the soil. God does it all. Thank you, guys. Anyone else got any final remarks?
And like with the girl at school, it's that girl knew what the issue was. It's just we have to be able to sort of let go and listen, and then be able to share, take that off her shoulders and deal with it, and she'll be able to manage to because everybody, so I don't know whether I've got it quite right or not. I know what I mean, but whether
I think you're spot on. We don't want to shame people. We want to actually include them and show them that actually we hear that you have a need.
Yes.
We hear you. We hear. I can see you. We love you, and because we love you, we want to know what is that need. Why are you so angry?
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I was going to say, just in regards, it's probably a conversation for another day, another time, but if you look at, say, the Holy Spirit, or what the definition of the Christ is, we'll look into it deeper, you'll find that it's all about inclusion.
Yeah.
It's as if, if we took one drop of water out of the ocean, is it depleted by one drop? It's quite it's a very interesting theological discussion that we could have in regards to that, but it's about inclusion and diversity. So it's been a very good night, I think, to that.
Brilliant. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I totally agree that it's all about inclusion, but we also need to know that the Bible talks of the Paul and the early church and Jesus talks about if we just include everyone who don't really want it, what happens?
Well, that's the bit. That's the meaning of I suppose spreading the gospel.
but
going forward.
But I'm not saying not to include people, but if people are included in a community who don't want the reality of that community, like it's not ready yet, what happens?
Freaks them out.
It freaks them out. Their behavior then can freak others out. And then it starts to quickly destroy things, yeah? So I think there's a lot of wisdom for Jesus to say, stay with the seekers of peace, because you're slowly building a community. You're slowly building relationships, and then it just builds up trust. And we see what happens if you get people part of the community quickly that rise up that don't really follow God, or they don't.
Well, they've generally got their own interpretation to start off with, their own identity, haven't they?
And their own agenda.
That you have to look at. So
yeah,
it does. I suppose it does get to that, and it gets to how we communicate, how we convey. Again, actions, words. Those that will be freaked out might be, but it might need that freak out in order to motivate someone too. You never know. You just don't know.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. And the freak out brings up stuff in people, and then but even that person, it brings up stuff in that person.
Yeah.
To be able to say, you know what, if you're going to behave like that, you're going to do that here just at this time because that scares people, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, but you're welcome. Still welcome. They're still included. And then it's challenging behaviors, not because we hate them, but because we want everyone to be safe. And we're connecting with people who are vulnerable. You want vulnerable to be looked after too, eh? So it's just constantly finding creative ways. How do you connect with people and find a peaceful and a safe solution? And sometimes the whole idea of, let's think of like the regular idea of church, where say you've got 300 or 1,000 people, and you're saying, hey, Joel, come with me to this group of 1,000 people. Let's go and hang out. And most people will be like, no way. I don't want to be in a room with 1,000 people. No way. I'm anxious at the thought of being in a room with 4 people. So it's fun. And that's why I think we have to be really flexible to be able to meet the needs of the people that we're coming from.
And how are you going to do social distancing with all that route?
Yes, that's right. You can't. Yeah. Good on you guys. Thank you so much.
All right.
Well done,
Thanks, Peter.
Onto Zoom.
Yay!
Look at that in there.
Thank you so much.
Bye. See you.
Very, very practical.
Yeah, I think the gospel is practical. It's so practical.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Kate.
Love you.
Bye,
See you later.
Bye. Thank you. So good. Zoom goodbye for 5 minutes. Goodbye.
Bye. I'm gonna go to the supermarket.
Oh, good on you.
I'm making potato and leek soup tomorrow.
Good on you. That's so good. Hang on. I'll just stop the.
If